Welcome to today's review. Casio is one of my favorite watch brands, and I couldn't help myself, and I got one of these Casio Duros. I've heard about these watches for years, and I just felt like I had to check it out. So these are known for being one of the cheapest 200-meter water-resistant divers, and of course this is the black version, and these go for around $50 US. And while I was browsing on Amazon, another one came up and I just couldn't help myself. So let's take a quick look today at the Duro, and let's also have a quick comparison with this other Casio Solar, which is like a dark horse, I would say. If you're looking at purchasing a Duro, definitely check one of these out also. This is not rated to 200 meters. This is rated to 100 meters of water resistance. But anyways, let's jump in. We'll review the Duro, and I've got a bunch of watches that I can give you as a size comparison. So this is a Citizen ProMaster, for example. This is my daily watch at the moment, and this one is a 41 millimeter watch, and you can see the Casio there. It is a 44. It is a big watch, but let's jump in and give it a full review. So let's start off with the dimensions of the Casio Duro. This one's got a 44 millimeter diameter. It's got a lug tip to lug tip of 49.2. Thickness is 12.4 up to a flat mineral crystal. Lug width is measured at just over 22 millimeters. So this should be able to take 22 millimeter straps. Interestingly, both this one and this Casio Solar both have a 22.4 millimeter lug width, so just an FYI. The straps taper slightly down to 21, and the clasp size, the buckle size is 29 millimeters. The weight for the Duro is 93 grams, so it's not too heavy and actually is pretty comfortable to wear. This Casio Solar, on the other hand, measures about the same, 44 millimeters in diameter. It is a little bit tougher to measure as it's got the Casio hump on one side of the case. The lug tip to lug tip is slightly longer. It's actually 51 millimeters on this one. They both do have a nice curve to the lugs. This one has an even steeper curve down to hug your wrists. And this one is a thinner 11 millimeters up to, again, a flat mineral crystal, as opposed to the 12.4 on the Duro. 22 millimeter strap on this one. It's the same exact strap as far as I can tell. And this one also weighs about 10 grams less than the Duro, so this one comes in at 83 grams. Taking a closer look at the Casio Duro now, it's got an aluminum black bezel. The font on there is kind of that similar Submariner style that we're used to. The printing is nice quality, good overall quality finish to the bezel. It's got the applied loom pip at 12 o'clock, and it's got a similar type of finish to that coin edge Submariner style of the bezel. Grip is okay. It is definitely a bit tough to turn, and I'll just stop talking here for a few seconds so you can listen. So that's the bezel action. It's 120 click, and not a great feel to the bezel. Like I said, tough to turn, and it has lots of backplay that's noticeable. And it does line up with the minute tracker on the chapter ring. The dial on this one has a nice sunburst black finish. It is really quite nice, especially at this price point. That was a total pleasant surprise. As I move the watch around, hopefully you can see some of that light play. Dial finish, really great there. The indices on the dial appear to be applied, and they have a nice polished silver surround. Same goes for the handset, although I do like the appearance of the sword and arrow hand. They could be slightly larger, and same thing can be said about the applied indices. There's a bit of empty space, it seems, on the dial, so it would have been nice if everything was just magnified a little bit. it would even help a little bit with the legibility. It does have a cool seconds hand with that nice red tip. But again, the seconds hand doesn't quite reach the minute tracker on the dial. The date cutout also, again, is a bit undersized. It does have that nice white framing, but legibility is not that great because for such a big 44mm case size, everything on the dial just seems to be a bit too small. Although I do like the design of everything that they have on the dial. In classic Casio fashion, the seconds hand hits all of the markers on the minute tracker. That's one thing that they seem to get right even on their cheapest watches. So I'm sure I speak for all of us watch enthusiasts when I say we do appreciate that, Casio, and please continue doing that. The case finishing on this guy is okay. It's got a simple brushed finish on the lugs, polished between the lugs there, and polished sides of the case. The polishing definitely is kind of subpar. The reflections that you see on the polished surfaces appear to be blurry, and there aren't really any crisp transitions between the polished and brushed finishes. You wouldn't expect much more at this price point. My thoughts overall on this Casio Duro are that it's just too big for me. For my wrists, 44mm is too large. My wrists are 6.5 inches, and I'll give you a quick wrist shot in a moment here. But I would like to bring in this Casio Solar model and give you guys a quick comparison for the dial and the case details. So this one has a nice deep blue finish on the dial, and then a lighter and shinier finish on the bezel insert. Bezel on this one actually does not rotate. It is a fixed bezel, which is a huge bummer on this model. If this one had a rotating bezel, it could have been an actual contender for a cheap diver such as the Casio Duro, but unfortunately they went with a fixed bezel on this one. This one does of course have the solar powered movement, which is one of the biggest differences between these two models, and it does give you the day and date complications. The size of the indices and handset and the cutout for the day date just seems like in better proportion. Everything is slightly larger than it is on the Duro, so I do prefer the legibility of this dial. I would even say that I prefer the design of this dial. I like the splash of yellow that they've got on the seconds hand and on the minute hand, and it's got a yellow accent on that 12 o'clock marker. I do like a good day date cutout, and this one is done really nicely, framed in white, and it's got nice applied markers, similar to the Duro, but like I said, slightly larger. The other thing I prefer about this one is the case. The Duro, again, is just a very simple formula for the case, copying a certain watch that we're all used to. This one kind of does its own thing. It's got the classic Casio hump on this side. Again, on this one, the sides are all polished also. And this one has the circular brushed finishing on the top of the lugs. The other good thing about this one is it's slightly lighter, 10 grams lighter, like I said, and thinner. So it sits much nicer on the wrist, and it does have that nice curved finish to the lugs, so it hugs your wrist a little bit better than the Duro does. Really, guys, you can't go wrong with either one of these two Casios. I would say I probably have room in my collection for both of them, but I have a bit of a problem with purchasing watches, so you might be in the market for one of these two. Honestly, it is a personal preference. I prefer this solar model, but you may prefer the Duro or one of the variants with different bezel insert colors, and there's also a blue version now. So really great watch, not much negative to say about it at this price point, but there's a few more things we want to cover. Let's give it a quick size comparison with a few other watches. So I showed it next to the Citizen. Here we go, you can really see the size difference. Citizen's a 41, and here is the side profile. Here it is next to a Casio G-Shock. And as you can see, again, the Duro just looks huge compared to the G-Shock. And here is the side profile. here it is next to a Vostok Amphibia. And as you can see, the Vostok has that nice short lug to lug, so it wears really nicely, but you can see the Casio dial looks much bigger. And here it is from the side. Of course, the Vostok is thicker. Wears pretty nicely still, one of my all-time favorites. Here it is next to a 40mm mil sub homage, so just so you can see a comparison of what a 40mm watch looks like next to the Duro at 44mm. And just for fun, here it is next to another 44mm watch. I believe this is a 44. This is a homage of a Seiko Marine Master. But again, it has that Seiko magic. I'm not sure if I would have to double check the actual case size, but it's got the Seiko design magic of wearing much smaller. And here's the side profile, of course, the Heimdallr much thicker. Alright guys, let's take a look at a wrist shot for both of these Casios, and we'll give it a lume shot for your reference. If you found this type of review helpful, then make sure you subscribe to my channel, because I'll be posting a ton of more video content. And here is a wrist shot of the Duro on my 6.5-inch wrists. You've probably seen a million of these reviews and wrist shots by now if you're interested in the Duro, but this was my opinion for what it's worth. If it's good enough for Bill Gates, then who am I to criticize? Hugs the wrist really nicely. You can see those curved down lugs really help. And for a 44mm watch, it actually wears pretty comfortably. And the strap, which I didn't talk too much about, it's pretty much the classic Casio resin strap. And I personally don't find them too bad, but most people do end up replacing the strap. And here is the Casio Solar. As you can see, it sits thinner on the wrist, and it curves down on the lugs even more aggressively than the Duro. Still quite a large watch. Same strap. Super legible. I love the blue finish on this one with the yellow accents. This would be my pick between the two. This one's got 100 meters of water resistance, which is plenty for me, but it is a totally objective choice between the two, and really at this price point, either of these two are tough to beat. And here is a lume shot of both watches after they've been charged up by my studio lighting. As you can see, the Casio Solar on the right here has a much stronger lume as compared to the Duro, which is really already starting to fade. The handset seems a bit brighter than the indices. And here they are again, side by side. So between the two of them, the Solar has proven that it's got much better lume. Alright guys, hopefully you had fun watching this. Now go check out some of my other content.